The important articles of the Indian Constitution are the foundation of India's democratic governance, adopted on November 26, 1949, and enacted on January 26, 1950. This comprehensive constitutional document, with 25 parts, 12 schedules, and 448 articles, defines the structure, powers, and responsibilities of the Union, states, and local governments. As a dynamic document, the Indian Constitution has undergone 106 amendments, ensuring it meets the nation's evolving governance needs. It safeguards citizens' rights, defines their duties, and promotes justice, equality, and the rule of law across India. Parts of the Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution, adopted on November 26, 1949, and implemented on January 26, 1950, consists of 25 parts, 12 schedules, and 448 articles. Originally, it featured 395 articles divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. Over time, the constitutional amendment introduced 4 additional parts and schedules, though one part was later repealed. As of December 2024, the Constitution has been amended 106 times, reflecting its dynamic and evolving nature. Part Subjects Articles. Part I Union and its Territory Article 1-4. Part 2 Citizenship Article 5-11. Part 3 Fundamental Rights Article 12-35. Part 4 Directive Principles of State Policy Article 36-51. Part 4A Fundamental Duties Article 51A. Part B The Union Article 52-151. Part 6 The States Article 152-237. Part 7 7th Constitutional Amendment Act, CAA, 1956, repealed. Part 8 Union Territories Article 239-242. Part 9 The Panchayats Article 243-243A. Part 9A The Municipalities Article 243P-243ZG. Part 9B Cooperative Societies Article 243ZH-243ZT. Part X Scheduled and Tribal Areas Article 244-244A. Part 11 Relation between Union and States Article 245-263. Part 12 Finance, Property, Contracts, and Suits Article 264-300A. Part 13 Trade, Commerce, and Intercourse within the Territory of India Article 301-307. Part 14 Services under the Union and States Article 308-323. Part 14A Tribunals Article 323A-323B. Part 15 Elections Article 324-329A. Part 16 Special Provisions relating to certain classes Article 330-342. Part 17 Official Languages Article 343-351. Part 18 Emergency Provisions Article 352-360. Part 19 Miscellaneous Article 361-367. Part XX Amendment of the Constitution Article 368. Part XXI Temporary, Transitional, and Special Provisions Article 369-392. Part XXII. Short title, Commencement, Authoritative Text in Hindi and Repeals. Article 393-395. Important articles in Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution serves as a cornerstone of governance, establishing the framework for the nation's administration and defining the rights and duties of its citizens. Certain articles play a pivotal role in shaping India's democratic processes. This discussion highlights these key articles and their significance in our constitutional framework. Part I, Union and its Territory, Articles 1-4. The Indian Constitution, under Part I, Articles 1-4, defines the Union's name and territory while outlining provisions for the admission, establishment, and reorganization of states. It also empowers Parliament to amend related schedules and address supplementary legal matters. Article Provisions. Article 1 Name and Territory of the Union. Article 2 Admission or establishment of new states. Article 3 Formation of new states, and altering the areas, boundaries, or names of existing states. Article 4 State laws under Articles 2 and 3 should include provisions for amending the first and fourth schedules and supplemental, incidental, and consequential matters. Part 2. Citizenship, Articles 5 to 11. The Indian Constitution, under Part 2, Articles 5 to 11, defines citizenship at its commencement on January 26, 1950, but does not provide permanent provisions. It empowers Parliament to legislate on citizenship, resulting in the Citizenship Act of 1955, which is amended periodically. Article Provisions. Article 5 Citizenship at the commencement of the Constitution. Article 6 Rights of citizenship to certain persons who have migrated to India from Pakistan. Article 7 Rights of citizenship to certain migrants to Pakistan. Article 8 Rights of citizenship to certain persons of Indian origin residing outside India. Article 9 Persons voluntarily acquire citizenship of a foreign state and are not to be citizens. Article 10 Continuance of the rights of citizenship. Article 11 Parliament to regulate the right of citizenship by law. Part 3, Fundamental Rights, Articles 12 to 35. The Indian Constitution, inspired by the USA's Bill of Rights, enshrines fundamental rights in Part 3, Articles 12 to 35, often described as the Magna Carta of India. These rights ensure equality, dignity, and freedoms, protecting individuals from state overreach while promoting democracy, public interest, and the rule of law. Article Provisions. Article 12 Definition of state. Article 13 Laws inconsistent with or in derogation of the fundamental rights. Right to equality. Article 14 Equality before law. Article 15 Prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Article 16 Equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. Article 17 Abolition of untouchability. Article 18 Abolition of titles. Right to freedom. Article 19 Protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. Article 20 Protection in respect of conviction for offenses. Article 21 Protection of life and personal liberty. Article 21 A Right to education. Article 22 Protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. Right against exploitation. Article 23 prohibits human trafficking and forced labor, and protects individuals from exploitative practices. Article 24 Prohibition of employment of children in factories, etc. Right to freedom of religion. Article 25 Freedom of conscience and free profession, practice, and propagation of religion. Article 26 Freedom to manage religious affairs. Article 27 Freedom to pay taxes for the promotion of any particular religion. Article 28 Freedom as to attendance at religious instruction or religious worship in certain educational institutions. Cultural and educational rights. Article 29 Protection of interests of minorities. Article 30 Right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. Right to property, repealed by 44th CAA. Article 31 Compulsory acquisition of property. Article 31A Saving of laws providing for the acquisition of estates, etc. Article 31B Validation of certain acts and regulations. Article 31C Saving of laws giving effect to certain directive principles. Right to constitutional remedies. Article 32 Remedies for enforcement of rights conferred by this part. Article 33 Power of Parliament to modify the rights conferred by this part in their application to forces, etc. Article 34 Restriction on rights conferred by this part while martial law is in force in any area. Article 35 Legislation to give effect to the provisions of this part. Part 4, Directive Principles of State Policy, Articles 36 to 51. The Indian Constitution incorporates directive principles of state policy in Part 4, Articles 36 to 51, inspired by the Irish and Spanish constitutions. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar called them novel features, and Granville Austin termed them the conscience of the Constitution, reflecting their role alongside fundamental rights, FRS, in shaping India's democratic philosophy. Article Provisions. Article 36 Definition of State. Article 37 Application of the principles contained in this part. Article 38 State to secure a social order for the promotion of the welfare of the people. Article 39 Certain principles of policy are to be followed by the state. Article 39A Equal justice and free legal aid. Article 40 Organization of village panchayats. Article 41 Right to work, education, and public assistance in certain cases. Article 42 Provision for just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. Article 43 Living wage, etc., for workers. Article 43A Participation of workers in the management of industries. Article 44 Uniform Civil Code for the citizens. Article 45 Provision for early childhood care and education to children below the age of 6 years. Article 46 Promotion of educational and economic interests of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections. Article 47 The duty of the state is to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health. Article 48 Organization of agriculture and animal husbandry. Article 48A Protection and improvement of the environment and safeguarding of forests and wildlife. Article 49 Protection of monuments, places, and objects of national importance. Article 50 Separation of the judiciary from the executive. Article 51 Promotion of international peace and security. Part EVA, Fundamental Duties, Article 51A. The Indian Constitution incorporated fundamental duties through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1976, based on recommendations by the Swaran Singh Committee. This addition, during the internal emergency, emphasized citizens' responsibilities alongside their rights, introducing Part EVA and Article 51A, listing 10 fundamental duties. Article Provisions. Article 51A Fundamental Duties. Part B, Union, Article 52 to Article 151. The Indian Constitution, in Part B, Articles 52 to 151, details the Union's executive framework, encompassing the President, Vice President, Prime Minister, Council of Ministers, and Attorney General of India. It highlights the President's role as the nation's first citizen, symbolizing unity and integrity. President and Vice President, Articles 52 to 73. The Indian Constitution, through Articles 52 to 73, outlines the roles, powers, and responsibilities of the President of India and Vice President of India. These provisions define their election process, terms, qualifications, and functions, emphasizing their pivotal roles in the Union's executive framework. Article Provisions. Article 52 The President of India. Article 53 Executive Power of the Union. Article 54 Election of President. Article 55 Manner of Election of President. Article 57 Eligibility for re-election. Article 58 Qualifications for election as President. Article 59 Conditions of the President's office. Article 60 Oath or affirmation by the President. Article 61 Procedure for impeachment of the President. Article 62 Time of holding an election to fill a vacancy in the office of President. Article 63 The Vice President of India. Article 64 The Vice President to be ex officio Chairman of the Council of States. Article 65 The Vice President to act as President or to discharge his functions during casual vacancies in the office, or the absence, of the President. Article 66 Election of Vice President. Article 67 Term of office of Vice President. Article 68 Time of holding election to fill a vacancy in the office of Vice President and the term of office of person elected to fill casual vacancy. Article 70 Discharge of President's functions in other contingencies. Article 71 Matters relating to the election of President. Article 72 Pardoning powers of the President and to suspend, remit, or commute sentences in certain cases. Article 73 The extent of executive power of the Union. Union Minister, Articles 74 to 78. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 74 to 78, defines the structure and responsibilities of the Union Council of Ministers, including their role in advising the President. It also outlines provisions related to the Attorney General of India, the conduct of government business, and the Prime Minister's duties in maintaining communication with the President. Article Provisions. Article 74 Council of Ministers to aid and advise the President. Article 75 Other provisions as to ministers. Article 76 Attorney General of India, AGI. Article 78 Duties of the Prime Minister as respect to the furnishing of information to the President, etc. Parliament, Articles 79 to 122. The Indian Constitution establishes Parliament as the legislative organ of the Union government, central to the democratic system and modelled on the Westminster framework. Through Articles 79 to 122, it defines the structure of Parliament, comprising the President, Rajya Sabha, Council of States, and Lok Sabha, House of the People, outlining their composition, powers, functions, and legislative procedures. Article Provisions. Article 79 Constitution of Parliament. Article 80 Composition of the Council of States. Article 81 Composition of the House of the People. Article 82 Readjustment after each census. Article 83 Duration of Houses of Parliament. Article 84 Qualification for membership of Parliament. Article 85 Sessions of Parliament, prorogation and dissolution. Article 86 Right of the President to address and send messages to Houses. Article 87 Special Address by the President. Article 88 Rights of Ministers and Attorney General as respects Houses. Officers of Parliament. Article 89 Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the Council of States. Article 90 Vacation of, resignation of, and removal from, the office of Deputy Chairman. Article 91 Power of Deputy Chairman or other person to perform the duties of the office, or to act as Chairman. Conduct of business. Article 92 The Chairman or the Deputy Chairman is not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. Article 93 The Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of the People. Article 94 Vacation of, resignation of, and removal from, the offices of Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Article 95 Power of the Deputy Speaker or other person to perform the duties of the office, or to act as Speaker. Article 96 The Speaker or the Deputy Speaker is not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. Article 97 Salaries and allowances of the Chairman and Deputy Chairman and the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Article 99 Oath or affirmation by members. Article 100 Voting in Houses, power of Houses to act notwithstanding vacancies and quorum. Disqualifications of members. Article 101 Vacation of seats. Article 102 Disqualifications for membership. Article 103 Decision on questions as to disqualifications of members. Article 104 Penalty for sitting and voting before making an oath or affirmation under Article 99 or when not qualified or disqualified. Powers, privileges, and immunities of Parliament and its members. Article 105 Parliamentary privileges, powers, and rights of the Houses of Parliament, as well as those of their members and parliamentary committees. Article 106 Salaries and allowances of members. Legislative procedure. Article 107 Provisions as to the introduction and passing of bills. Article 108 Joint sitting of both houses in certain cases. Article 109 Special procedure in respect of money bills. Article 110 Definition of money bills. Article 111 Assent to bills. Procedures in Financial Matters. Article 112 Annual Financial Statement. Article 113 Procedure in Parliament with respect to estimates. Article 114 Appropriation Bills. Article 115 Supplementary, Additional, or Excess Grants. Article 116 Votes on Account, Votes of Credit, and Exceptional Grants. Article 117 Special Provisions as to Financial Bills. Procedure generally. Article 118 Rules of Procedure. Article 119 Regulation by Law of Procedure in Parliament in relation to financial business. Article 120 Language to be used in Parliament. Article 121 Restriction on discussion in Parliament. Article 122 Courts not to inquire into proceedings of Parliament. Legislative powers of the President. Article 123 Power of President to promulgate ordinances during recess of Parliament. Supreme Court, Articles 124 to 147. The Indian Constitution establishes an integrated judicial system with the Supreme Court at the top, supported by high courts and subordinate courts. Articles 124 to 147 outline its organization, jurisdiction, and powers, making it the apex authority for enforcing central and state laws uniformly. Article Provisions. Article 124 Establishment and Constitution of Supreme Court, SC. Article 124 A National Judicial Appointments Commission, struck down by the Supreme Court in 2015. Article 124b Functions of Commission. Article 124c Power of Parliament to make law. Article 125 Salaries, etc., of judges. Article 126 Appointment of Acting Chief Justice. Article 127 Appointment of ad hoc judges. Article 128 Attendance of retired judges at sittings of the Supreme Court. Article 129 Supreme Court to be a court of record. Article 130 The seat of Supreme Court. Article 131 Original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Article 132 Appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in appeals from high courts in certain cases. Article 133 Appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court in appeals from high courts in regard to civil matters. Article 134 Appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in regard to criminal matters. Article 134 A certificate for appeal to the Supreme Court. Article 135 Jurisdiction and powers of the Federal Court under existing law to be exercisable by the Supreme Court. Article 136 Special leave to appeal by the Supreme Court. Article 137 Review of judgments or orders by the Supreme Court. Article 138 Enlargement of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Article 139 Conferment on the Supreme Court of powers to issue certain writs. Article 140 Ancillary power of the Supreme Court. Article 141 Law declared by the Supreme Court to be binding on all courts. Article 142 Enforcement of decrees and orders of the Supreme Court and orders as to discovery, etc. Article 143 Power of the President to consult the Supreme Court. Article 144 Civil and judicial authorities to act in aid of the Supreme Court. Article 145 Rule of Court, etc. Article 146 Officers and servants and the expenses of the Supreme Court. Controller and Auditor General of India, Articles 148 to 151. The Indian Constitution, through Articles 148 to 151, establishes the Controller and Auditor General, CAG, of India as an independent authority responsible for auditing the accounts of the Union and state governments. These provisions define the CAG's powers, duties, and role in ensuring transparency and accountability in public financial management. Article Provisions. Article 148 Controller and Auditor General of India. Article 144 Duties and Powers of the Comptroller and Auditor General. Article 145 Form of Accounts of the Union and the States. Article 146 Audit Reports. Part 6 State, Article 152 to 237. The Indian Constitution, under Part 6, Articles 152 to 237, outlines the structure of the state government by defining the roles of the executive, legislature, and judiciary, including the powers of governors, chief ministers, and the jurisdiction of high courts and subordinate courts. Governor, Articles 153 to 167. The Indian Constitution, through Articles 153 to 167, defines the role of the governor as the constitutional head of a state, detailing their powers, duties, and appointment process, including legislative, executive, and judicial responsibilities, ensuring balanced state governance. Article Provisions. Article 152 Definition of State. Article 153 Governors of States. Article 154 Executive Power of the State. Article 155 Appointment of Governor. Article 156 Term of Office of Governor. Article 157 Qualifications for appointment as Governor. Article 158 Conditions of Governor's Office. Article 160 Discharge of the functions of the Governor in certain contingencies. Article 161 Power of the Governor to grant pardons and others. Article 162 Extent of executive power of the state. State Ministers and Advocate General, Articles 163 to 167. The Indian Constitution provides for a parliamentary system of government in states, modeled on the Union framework. The Council of Ministers, led by the Chief Minister, acts as the real executive authority, with Articles 163 and 164 defining their status, responsibilities, and functions in the politico-administrative system. Article Provisions. Article 163 Council of Ministers to aid and advise the Governor. Article 164 Other provisions as to ministers like appointments, term, salaries, and others. Article 165 Advocate General of State. Article 166 Conduct of business of the government of a state. Article 167 Duties of the Chief Minister regarding furnishing of information to the Governor. State Legislature, Article 168 to 213. The Indian Constitution places the state legislature at the core of the political system of a state. Articles 168 to 213 outline its organization, composition, duration, powers, and procedures, highlighting similarities with the Parliament while acknowledging certain differences. Article Provisions. General. Article 168 Constitution of Legislatures in States. Article 169 Abolition or creation of state legislative councils. Article 170 Composition of the legislative assemblies. Article 171 Composition of the legislative councils. Article 172 Duration of state legislatures. Article 173 Qualification for membership of the state legislature. Article 174 Sessions of the state legislature, prorogation and dissolution. Article 175 Right of the Governor to address and send messages to the House or Houses. Article 176 Special Address by the Governor. Article 177 Rights of Ministers and Advocate General as respect the Houses. Officers of the State Legislature. Article 178 The Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. Article 179 Vacation and resignation of, and removal from, the offices of Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Article 180 Power of the Deputy Speaker or other person to perform the duties of the office of, or to act as, Speaker. Article 181. The Speaker or the Deputy Speaker is not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. Article 182. The Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the Legislative Council. Article 183. Vacation and resignation of, and removal from, the offices of Chairman and Deputy Chairman. Article 184. Power of the Deputy Chairman or other person to perform the duties of the office of, or to act as, Chairman. Article 185. The Chairman or the Deputy Chairman is not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. Article 186. Salaries and allowances of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker and the Chairman and Deputy Chairman. Article 187. Secretariat of State Legislature. Conduct of business. Article 188. Oath or affirmation by members. Article 189. Voting in houses, power of houses to act notwithstanding vacancies and quorum. Disqualifications of members. Article 190. Vacation of seats. Article 191. Disqualifications for membership. Article 192. Decision on questions as to disqualifications of members. Article 193. Penalty for sitting and voting before making an oath or affirmation under Article 188 or when not qualified/disqualified. Powers, privileges, and immunities of state legislatures and their members. Article 194. Powers, privileges, etc., of the House of Legislatures, members, and committees thereof. Article 195. Salaries and allowances of members. Legislative procedure. Article 196. Provisions as to the introduction and passing of bills. Article 197. Restriction on powers of the Legislative Council regarding bills other than money bills. Article 198. Special procedure in respect of money bills. Article 199. Definition of money bills. Article 200. Assent to bills. Article 201. Bills reserved for the President's consideration. Procedure in financial matters. Article 202. Annual financial statement. Article 203. Procedure in legislature with respect to estimates. Article 204. Appropriation bills. Article 205. Supplementary, additional, or excess grants. Article 206. Votes on account, votes of credit, and exceptional grants. Article 207. Special provisions as to financial bill. Procedure generally. Article 208. Rules of procedure. Article 209. Regulation by law of procedure in the legislature of the state in relation to financial business. Article 210. Language to be used in the legislature. Article 211. Restriction on discussion in the legislature. Article 212. Courts not to inquire into proceedings of the legislature. Legislative powers of the governor. Article 213. Power of governor to promulgate ordinances during recess of legislature. High Court, Article 214 to 231. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 214 to 231, establishes a unified judicial system with high courts positioned below the Supreme Court but above the subordinate courts. High courts play a pivotal role in the judicial administration of states and union territories, with their jurisdiction being either exclusive to a state or shared across multiple states or union territories. Article provisions. Article 214. High courts for states. Article 215. High courts to be courts of record. Article 216. Constitution of High Courts. Article 217. Appointment and conditions of the office of a judge of a high court. Provisions related to high court judges. Article 218. Application of certain provisions relating to the Supreme Court to high courts. Article 220. Restriction on practice after being a permanent judge. Article 222. Transfer of a judge from one high court to another. Article 223. Appointment of acting Chief Justice. Article 224 Appointment of additional and acting judges. Article 224A Appointment of retired judges at sittings of high courts. Jurisdiction and powers. Article 225 Jurisdiction of existing high courts. Article 226 Power of high courts to issue certain writs. Article 227 Power of superintendence over all courts by the High Court. Special provisions and miscellaneous. Article 228 Transfer of certain cases to the High Court. Article 229 Officers and servants and the expenses of high courts. Article 230 Extension of jurisdiction of high courts to Union territories. Article 231 Establishment of a common high court for two or more states. Subordinate court, Article 233 to 237. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 233 to 237, provides for the regulation and organization of subordinate courts to ensure their independence from the executive. These provisions include the appointment, posting, and promotion of district judges by the governor in consultation with the High Court. Article provisions. Article 233 Appointment of district judges. Article 233A Validation of appointments of, judgments, etc., delivered by certain district judges. Article 234 Recruitment of persons other than district judges to the judicial service. Article 235 Control over subordinate courts. Article 237 Application of the provisions of this chapter to certain classes or classes of magistrates. Part 7, the states in Part B of the first schedule. Article 238 repealed. Part 8, the Union territories, Articles 239 to 241. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 239 to 241 in Part 8, outlines the administration of Union territories. While these territories are administered by the President through appointed administrators, their governance structures vary, with some having legislative assemblies and councils of ministers. Article provisions. Article 239 Administration of Union territories. Article 239A Creation of local legislatures or council of ministers or both for certain Union territories. Article 239A Special provisions with respect to Delhi. Article 239 of provision in case of failure of constitutional machinery. Article 239B Power of administrator to promulgate ordinances during recess of legislature. Article 240 Power of the President to make regulations for certain Union territories. Article 241 High Courts for Union territories. Part 9, Panchayati Raj, Article 243 to 243A. The Indian Constitution established Panchayati Raj institutions as a system of rural local self-government through the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, encompassing Articles 243 to 243A. It aims to build democracy at the grassroots level and is entrusted with rural development across all states in India. Article provisions. Article 243 Definitions. Article 243A Gram Sabha. Article 243B Constitution of Panchayats. Article 243C Composition of Panchayats. Article 243D Reservation of seats. Article 243E Duration of Panchayats, and so on. Article 243F Disqualifications for membership. Article 243G Powers, authority, and responsibilities of Panchayats. Article 243H Powers to impose taxes by, and funds of, the Panchayats. Article 243I Constitution of Finance Commission to review the financial position. Article 243K Elections to the Panchayats. Article 243L Application to Union territories. Article 243M Part not to apply to certain areas. Article 243O Bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. Part 9A, Municipalities, Article 243p to 243zg. The Indian Constitution, through the 74th Amendment Act of 1992, introduced Part 9A, titled The Municipalities, covering Articles 243p to 243zg. This amendment provided constitutional status to municipalities, aiming to revitalize and strengthen urban local bodies for effective functioning as units of local government. Article Provisions. Article 243p Definitions. Article 243q Constitution of Municipalities. Article 243r Composition of Municipalities. Article 243's Constitution and Composition of Wards Committees, and so on. Article 243t Reservation of Seats. Article 243u Duration of Municipalities, and so on. Article 243v Disqualifications for membership. Article 243w Powers, Authority, and Responsibilities of Municipalities. Article 243x Powers to impose taxes by, and funds of, the municipalities. Article 243y Finance Commission. Article 243za Elections to the municipalities. Article 243zb Application to Union Territories. Article 243zd Committee for District Planning. Article 243ze Committee for Metropolitan Planning. Article 243zf Continuance of existing laws and municipalities. Article 243zg Bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. Part 9b, Cooperative Societies, Article 243zh to 243zt. The Indian Constitution, through the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011, granted constitutional status and protection to cooperative societies by adding Part 9b. This includes Articles 243zh to 243zt, ensuring the regulation and promotion of cooperative societies. Article Provisions. Article 243zh Definitions. Article 243zi Incorporation of cooperative societies. Article 243zk Election of members of board. Article 243zm Audit of accounts of cooperative societies. Article 243zr Application to multi-state cooperative societies. Article 243zs Application to union territories. Part X, the Scheduled and Tribal Areas, Article 244 to 244a. The Indian Constitution, under Article 244 in Part X, establishes a special administrative system for scheduled areas and tribal areas. The fifth schedule deals with the governance of scheduled areas and tribes in states except Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram. At the same time, the sixth schedule governs tribal areas in these northeastern states. Article Provisions. Article 244 Administration of scheduled areas and tribal areas. Article 244a Formation of an autonomous state comprising certain tribal areas in Assam and creation of a local legislature or council of ministers or both. Article 339 Control of the Union over the administration of scheduled areas and the welfare of scheduled tribes. Part 11, Relations between the Union and the States, Article 245 to 263. The Indian Constitution, under Part 11, Articles 245 to 263, outlines the legislative and administrative relations between the Union and the states. It defines the division of powers, legislative jurisdiction, and mechanisms for coordination, ensuring a balance between federal and state governance. Legislative relations, Articles 245 to 255. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 245 to 255, defines legislative relations between the center and states, dividing powers over territory and legislative subjects. It also permits parliamentary legislation in state fields under extraordinary situations and establishes the center's control over state legislation in specific cases. Article Provisions. Article 245 Extent of laws made by Parliament and by the legislatures of states. Article 246 Subject matter of laws made by Parliament and by the legislatures of states. Article 246A Special provision with respect to goods and services tax. Article 247 Power of Parliament to provide for the establishment of certain additional courts. Article 248 Residuary powers of legislation. Article 249 Power of Parliament to legislate with respect to a matter in the state list in the national interest. Article 250 Power of Parliament to legislate with respect to any matter in the state list if a proclamation of emergency is in operation. Article 251 Inconsistency between laws made by Parliament under Articles 249 and 250 and laws made by the legislatures of states. Article 252 Power of Parliament to legislate for two or more states by consent and adoption of such legislation by any other state. Article 253 Legislation for giving effect to international agreements. Article 254 Inconsistency between laws made by Parliament and laws made by the legislatures of states. Article 255 Requirements as to recommendations and previous sanctions are to be regarded as matters of procedure only. Administrative Relations, Articles 256 to 263. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 256 to 263, governs administrative relations between the Union and the states. It ensures cooperation and coordination through obligations, control mechanisms, and provisions like the Interstate Council and dispute resolution over interstate relations in river waters. Article Provisions. Article 256 Obligation of states and the Union. Article 257 Control of the Union over states in certain cases. Article 258 Power of the Union to confer powers, etc., on states in certain cases. Article 258A Power of the states to entrust functions to the Union. Article 260 Jurisdiction of the Union in relation to territories outside India. Article 261 Public Acts, Records, and Judicial Proceedings. Article 262 Adjudication of disputes relating to waters of interstate rivers or river valleys. Article 263 Provisions with respect to an interstate council. Part 12, Finance, Property, Contracts, and Suits, Article 268 to 293. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 268 to 293, outlines financial relations between the Union and states, covering tax levies, distribution, grants, and borrowing. It introduces key mechanisms like the Finance Commission and GST Council, ensuring fiscal federalism and cooperative governance. Article Provisions. Article 268 Duties levied by the Union but collected and appropriated by the states. Article 269 Taxes levied and collected by the Union but assigned to the states. Article 269 A levy and collection of goods and services tax in the course of interstate trade or commerce. Article 270 Taxes levied and distributed between the Union and the states. Article 271 Surcharge on certain duties and taxes for purposes of the Union. Article 274 Prior recommendations of the President required bills affecting taxation in which states are interested. Article 275 Grants from the Union to certain states. Article 276 Taxes on professions, trades, callings, and employment. Article 279A Goods and Services Tax Council. Article 280 Finance Commission. Article 281 Recommendations of the Finance Commission. Article 283 Custody, etc., of consolidated funds, contingency funds, and money credited to the public accounts. Article 292 Borrowing by the Government of India. Article 293 Borrowing by states. Part 13 Interstate Trade, Commerce, Articles 301 to 307. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 301 to 307, regulates interstate trade and commerce, ensuring economic unity by guaranteeing freedom of trade while permitting reasonable restrictions by Parliament or states to address specific concerns. Article Provisions. Article 301 Freedom of Trade, Commerce, and Intercourse. Article 302 Power of Parliament to impose restrictions on trade, commerce, and intercourse. Article 303 Restrictions on the legislative powers of the Union and of the states with regard to trade and commerce. Article 304 Restrictions on trade, commerce, and intercourse among states. Article 305 Saving of existing laws and laws providing for state monopolies. Part 14, Services under the Union and the States, Articles 308 to 323. The Indian Constitution, under Part 14, Articles 308 to 323, regulates all India, central, and state services while establishing the Union Public Service Commission, UPSC, and State Public Service Commissions, SPSCs, to ensure efficient recruitment and governance in public administration. Public Services. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 308 to 314, provides for the regulation of all India services, central services, and state services, ensuring a structured administrative framework across the country. Article Provisions. Article 309 Recruitment and Conditions of Service of Persons Serving the Union or a State. Article 311 Dismissal, Removal, or reduction in rank of persons employed in civil capacities under the Union or a State. Article 312 All India Services. Article 312A Power of Parliament to vary or revoke conditions of service of officers of certain services. Public Service Commission. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 315 to 323, establishes the Union Public Service Commission, UPSC, as the central recruiting agency and the State Public Service Commission, SPSC, at the state level. These provisions ensure the composition, appointment, powers, functions, and independence of both UPSC and SPSCs, promoting autonomy and efficiency in their operations. Article Provisions. Article 315 Public Service Commissions for the Union and the States. Article 316 Appointment and Term of Office of Members. Article 317 Removal and Suspension of a Member of a Public Service Commission. Article 318 Power to make regulations as to conditions of service of members and staff of the Commission. Article 319 Prohibition as to the holding of office by members of the Commission on ceasing to be such members. Article 320 Functions of Public Service Commissions. Article 321 Power to extend functions of Public Service Commissions. Article 323 Reports of Public Service Commissions. Part XIVA, Tribunals, Article 323A and 323B. The Indian Constitution, under Part XIVA, Articles 323A and 323B, provides for the establishment of tribunals to handle administrative and other specialized matters, ensuring speedy and efficient dispute resolution outside traditional courts. Article Provisions. Article 323A Administrative Tribunals. Article 323B Tribunals for other matters. Part 15, Elections, Articles 324 to 329. The Indian Constitution, under Part 15, Articles 324 to 329, establishes the framework for free and fair elections in India, detailing the powers of the Election Commission, principles of universal adult suffrage, and the roles of Parliament and state legislatures in electoral governance. Article Provisions. Article 324 Superintendence, direction, and control of elections are to be vested in an election commission. Article 325 No person is to be ineligible for inclusion in or to claim to be included in a special, Electoral roll on grounds of religion, race, caste, or sex. Article 326 Elections to the House of the People and the Legislative Assemblies of States to be based on adult suffrage. Article 327 Power of Parliament to make provisions to elections to legislatures. Article 328 Power of Legislature of a state to make provisions to elections to such legislature. Article 329 Bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. Part 16, Special Provisions relating to certain classes, Articles 330 to 342A. The Indian Constitution, under Part 16, Articles 330 to 342A, provides special provisions for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, backward classes, and the Anglo-Indian community. These provisions, including reserved representation and commissions, aim to promote social justice and equality in line with constitutional ideals. Article Provisions. Article 330 Reservation of seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the House of the People. Article 332 Reservation of seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the legislative assemblies of the states. Article 334 Reservation of seats and special representation to cease after 70 years. Article 335 Claims of SCS and STS to services and posts. Article 336 Special provision for the Anglo-Indian community in certain services. Article 337 Special provision to educational grants for the benefit of the Anglo-Indian community. Article 338 National Commission for Scheduled Castes. Article 338A National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. Article 338B National Commission for Backward Classes. Article 339 Control of the Union over the administration of scheduled areas and the welfare of scheduled tribes. Article 340 Appointment of a commission to investigate the conditions of backward classes. Article 341 Scheduled castes. Article 342 Scheduled tribes. Article 342A Socially and educationally backward classes. Part 17, Official language, Articles 343 to 351. The Indian Constitution, under Part 17, deals with the official language in Articles 343 to 351. These provisions are categorized into four heads: language of the Union, regional languages, language of the Judiciary, and special directives. Article Provisions. Article 343 Official language of the Union. Article 344 Commission and Committee of Parliament on Official Language. Regional language. Article 345 Official language or languages of a state. Article 346 Official language for communication between one state and another or between a state and the Union. Article 347 Special provision relating to language spoken by a section of the population of a state. Language of the Supreme Court, High Courts, etc. Article 348 Language to be used in the Supreme Court and High Courts and for acts, bills, etc. Article 349 Special procedure for the enactment of certain laws relating to language. Special directives. Article 350 Language to be used in representation for redress of grievances. Article 350A Facilities for instruction in the mother tongue at the primary stage. Article 350B Special Officer for linguistic minorities. Article 351 Directive for the development of the Hindi language. Part 18 Emergency provisions, Articles 352 to 360. The Indian Constitution, in Part 18, Articles 352 to 360, incorporates emergency provisions to empower the central government to address abnormal situations effectively. These provisions safeguard sovereignty, unity, integrity, security, and democracy by transforming the federal structure into a unitary one during emergencies without formal constitutional amendments. Article Provisions. Article 352 Proclamation of National Emergency. Article 353 Effect of Proclamation of Emergency. Article 354 Application of provisions relating to the distribution of revenues while a proclamation of emergency is in operation. Article 355 The duty of the Union was to protect states against external aggression and internal disturbance. Article 356 President's rule can be imposed on any state of India on the grounds of the failure of the constitutional machinery. Article 357 Exercise of legislative powers under a proclamation issued under Article 356. Article 358 Suspension of provisions of Article 19 during emergencies. Article 359 Suspension of the enforcement of the rights conferred by Part 3 during emergencies. Article 360 Provisions as to financial emergency. Part XX, Amendment of the Constitution. Article Provisions. Article 368 Power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and procedure therefore. Part XXI, Temporary, Transitional, and Special Provisions. The Indian Constitution, under Articles 371 to 371J in Part XXI, provides special provisions for 12 states, including Maharashtra, Gujarat, Nagaland, and others. These provisions aim to address regional aspirations, protect tribal and cultural interests, and ensure law and order in specific areas. Article Provisions. Article 369 Temporary power to Parliament to make laws with respect to certain matters in the state list as if they were matters in the concurrent list. Article 370 Temporary provisions to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Article 371 Special provision to the states of Maharashtra and Gujarat. Article 371A Special provision to the state of Nagaland. Article 371B Special provision to the state of Assam. Article 371C Special provision to the state of Manipur. Article 371D Special provisions to the state of Andhra Pradesh or the state of Telangana. Article 371E Establishment of a Central University in Andhra Pradesh. Article 371F Special provisions to the state of Sikkim. Article 371G Special provision to the state of Mizoram. Article 371H Special provision to the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Article 371I Special provision to the state of Goa. Article 371J Special provisions to the state of Karnataka. Schedules of Indian Constitution. When the Indian Constitution was adopted in 1949, it contained 8 schedules. Over time, subsequent amendments expanded this number to the current total of 12 schedules of Indian Constitution. This progression highlights the evolving nature of India's constitutional framework. Schedules. Features of schedules. First schedule. Names of states and union territories. Territorial jurisdiction of states is also included. Second schedule. The provisions in relation to allowances, privileges, and emoluments of President of India, Governors of Indian States, Speaker of Lok Sabha and Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha, Chairman of Rajya Sabha and Deputy Chairman of Rajya Sabha, Speaker and Deputy Speaker of Legislative Assemblies of Indian States, Chairman and Deputy Chairman of Legislative Councils of the Indian States, Judges of Supreme Court, SC, and High Courts, HCS, Controller and Auditor General. Third schedule. Forms of oath and affirmation for Union Ministers of India, Parliament election candidates, Members of Parliament, MPs, Judges of SC and HCS, Controller and Auditor General, State Ministers, State Legislature elections candidates, State Legislature members. Fourth schedule. Provisions in relation to the allocation of seats for states and union territories in the Rajya Sabha. Fifth schedule. Provisions in relation to the administration and control of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes. Sixth schedule. Provisions in relation to the administration of tribal areas in the states of Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram. 7th Schedule. This schedule deals with the 3 legislative lists: union, state, concurrent. 8th Schedule. It deals with the 22 official languages recognized by the Indian Constitution. 9th Schedule, introduced by the First Amendment Act of 1951, shields laws on land reforms and other matters from judicial review for violating fundamental rights. 10th Schedule, added by the 52nd Amendment Act of 1985, anti-defection law, outlines provisions for the disqualification of MPs and MLAs on grounds of defection. 11th Schedule, added by the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, specifies the powers, authority, and responsibilities of panchayats, encompassing 29 matters. 12th Schedule, added by the 74th Amendment Act of 1992, outlines the powers, authority, and responsibilities of municipalities, covering 18 matters. Important articles of Indian Constitution UPSC PYQs. Q1. With reference to the Constitution of India, prohibitions, or limitations or provisions contained in ordinary laws cannot act as prohibitions or limitations on the constitutional powers under Article 142. It could mean which one of the following? UPSC Prelims 2019. A. The decisions taken by the Election Commission of India while discharging its duties cannot be challenged in any court of law. B. The Supreme Court of India is not constrained by laws made by the Parliament in the exercise of its powers for ensuring complete justice. C. In the event of a grave financial crisis in the country, the President of India can declare a financial emergency without counsel from the Cabinet. D. State legislatures cannot make laws on certain matters without the concurrence of the Union legislature. ANS. B. Q2. Under which schedule of the Constitution of India can the transfer of tribal land to private parties for mining be declared null and void? UPSC Prelims 2019. A. 3rd Schedule. B. 5th Schedule. C. 9th Schedule. D. 12th Schedule. ANS. B. Q3. The provisions in the 5th Schedule and 6th Schedule in the Constitution of India are made in order to UPSC Prelims 2015. A. Protect the interests of scheduled tribes. B. Determine the boundaries between states. C. Determine the powers, authority, and responsibilities of panchayats. D. Protect the interests of all the border states. ANS. A. Q4. Which one of the following schedules of the Constitution of India contains provisions regarding the Anti-Defection Act? UPSC Prelims 2014. A. 2nd Schedule. B. 5th Schedule. C. 8th Schedule. D. 10th Schedule. ANS. D.
Thank you for watching. Helps you in your UPSC journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more guidance and click the bell icon to never miss an update. Keep studying hard and good luck.